Welcome everybody to our very first episode since our name change. And hopefully you notice we are now back to basics. So we are kind of getting back to basics today. We are making a recipe that goes way back, even before the 18th century, but we're probably going to make it 18th century style. Okay, so we're actually making a cottage pie, which a lot of people think it's a shepherd's pie, and the terms are used interchangeably, but technically a shepherd's pie was made of lamb or sheep, because shepherds, that's what they take care of. And they used the meat that they had. And a cottage pie was made out of ground beef. Now, where the difference comes in is a cottage pie made out of ground beef is not like the recipes today where you make it out of what we call ground beef. Over the change of time, what was considered ground beef has changed. Ground beef used to be cooked beef. It was actually shepherd's pie, cottage pie. It all started out as a way to use your leftovers, which is what we're doing here. We have a nice beef roast here that was cooked, and we didn't eat all of it, so we saved the leftovers. And we're just going to put this through a meat grinder, a hand crank meat grinder. Before they would have had a meat grinder like this, it actually would have all been done by hand, and it would have been chopped fine, just like mincemeat is chopped. Okay, so we are just about done grinding this. And I know that I said we were going to make this like 18th century style. They would not have had a meat grinder like this in the 18th century, but we do. So we're actually going to use it. And we do sometimes cook just strictly 18th century, but we thought we'd show you the grinder and how good it works. So we're done grinding the meat. Now we need to make some gravy. So this is all made from leftovers. And we had our leftover roast beef that you saw us ground into ground beef. We also have some leftover mashed potatoes. And I don't know if you've ever heated up leftover mashed potatoes, but you always end up having to add a little milk to them when you heat it up. So we're going to put a little milk in there. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn that on low. And while we heat up our mashed potatoes, just let that sit a little bit until that butter that's in those potatoes starts to get a little soft. And while we heat up those mashed potatoes, we're going to make the gravy. Now, if you would have had gravy already, then you could skip this step and just add your gravy. But we didn't have gravy already. We just had the juice in the meat. And I think we already told you that we all like onions. So I have a half of a medium-sized onion, and this onion is very pungent. So I'm only putting in a half. I just diced it up, and we're going to put this in with our gravy, because even though we cooked our roast with onions, we just want a little more onion flavor in our cottage pie. So we're going to let that cook a little bit and heat up the mashed potatoes, and then we'll show you how to make the gravy. And we're going to make an easy gravy. We're going to use cornstarch, because cornstarch is so much easier to work with than flour when it comes to making gravy. Alrighty, who is ready to make some gravy? Me, I am. So you need a whisk. We cooked our onions just until they were clear. I have in here 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and just about a half a cup of water. Cold water, make sure you use cold water to mix your cornstarch. So you need cold water for the cornstarch, and you need to have your stock boiling. And we're going to dump this in, and we're going to whisk it. And then we're going to let it, turn it up a little, and we're going to let it boil again and see how thick it is. But I can tell you by looking at it, we need a little more than that. And how much you need is all going to depend on how much stock you have. And if you get it too thick, you can always add a little water. Get it too thin, add a little more water and cornstarch.
Oh, I can see it thickening up
Yeah.
now.
And I'm going to call that good, you guys. So we're going to make this 2 different ways. One, how it has morphed into with mashed potatoes, and one in a little different way that will explain to you how it got the name cottage pie. So I'm going to take half of this meat that we ground beef, which we already talked about is not hamburger. And we're going to put this in here.
Not uncooked beef ground, but cooked beef ground.
Yes. And we're going to put part of it in here. And we're just going to smooth this out. We're going to dump our gravy over this after we get everything in here. Now, I did read that sometimes this was actually made with a potato crust on the bottom, so you would have put mashed potatoes in the bottom and the sides and the top. I personally think it would be better done with like sliced potatoes on the bottom, the sides, and the top, because they would get crispy like fried potatoes. I really don't want to push this down too much, but I'm trying to smooth it out, level it out a little bit. And the reason why I don't want to push it down too much, like I think I have that pushed down a little too much, is because our gravy has to penetrate that. So we're going to fluff her back up a little bit. Okay, so there is our meat mixture. And there is no set way that you have to do this, but now for years it has been made with your cooked vegetables, most likely what you would have served with your roast or what you had left over from the last couple of days, because they didn't have refrigeration. So we've got some carrots here. And we're going to put in a little layer of carrots. And if you don't like carrots, it could be something else. We also have some peas. So we're going to put in some peas. And you know what? I love peas, so the more peas, the merrier.
Yeah, me too.
As far as I'm concerned, I like peas just about any way. Straight out of the garden. Oh my, straight out of the garden is awesome.
Split the pod and eat them up.
No, eat it pod and all if they're young.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so now we have our peas and our carrots. I'm going to give this all just a little healthy dose of black pepper, because I like black pepper. And it wouldn't surprise me to find out that if you're doing this 18th century, that they would have thrown nutmeg in here, which nutmeg isn't, if you use fresh nutmeg, it's not like the nutmeg that is ground. I'm also going to give this just a little sprinkle of salt, but not much, because we're going to be adding something that is quite salty. We're going to add one little secret ingredient that was used often in the 18th century, and it's called mushroom ketchup. This has unbelievable flavor. It's a lot like Worcestershire sauce. It has like a little bit of a vinegar bite like Worcestershire sauce. It doesn't really taste like mushrooms. At least I don't taste the mushrooms, and I do have a friend that doesn't like mushrooms, and she really didn't think that it tasted a whole lot like mushrooms either. So maybe it's just your taste. Some people can taste mushrooms in it, but we're going to add a little of this because this just has umami. That's what it has. It's 18th century umami.
Yeah, it's kind of like a full-bodied Worcestershire sauce.
So we're going to add just about 2 tablespoons. What this does have, I will tell you, is a lot of sodium. So that's why I said I'm not going to add a whole lot of a whole lot of salt. So we're going to take this gravy. This is my grandma's gravy ladle, which is kind of special. And we are going to just ladle this gravy over the top of these 2 pies. So, we all eat pot pies today. And I don't know, maybe no one ever really stopped to think about where pot pies came from. But years ago, that was the way that a lot of food was made into a pie. Some of them had a crust that an outer standing type crust. It was really heavy and really dense, and it really wasn't made to be eaten. but it was the cooking vessel before they had pie plates and such.
Yeah,
Or maybe even afterwards, they probably still made some standing crust pies. But meat pies were quite common, and quite often they were actually eaten cold, which is different for us. But, they drank their water warm too, which is different for us, and their beer warm. We are going to take our mashed potatoes, and we're going to spoon them over the top of here. And I do have quite a bit of gravy in here. And I'm sure, yes, Angie, too much gravy. She's going to tell me I have too much gravy. And this is exactly why too much gravy isn't a good thing, is because how in God's tarnation am I actually going to smooth these potatoes out over the top of this pie? Well, it'll be by the grace of God if it happens. But I am going to try. But when you have gravy, it's so hard not to use it.
It is.
I mean, who doesn't
so
like
good.
gravy? So you can see here, I'm doing my best. Doing my best. One step that will not be in this, because it is in no way, shape, or form traditional at all. It's definitely an Americanized version, and the Brits don't quite understand why we would do that. Is there will be no cheese put on top of here. There's supposed to be just a few little light pats of butter on top of here that melt down and make everything richer when it gets baked. So we're not putting any cheese on here. So this is our more common cottage pie. Now,
the
traditionally,
modern version.
Traditionally, cottage pies were not made with mashed potatoes. They were made with sliced potatoes. And that leads to the reason of why it's actually called a cottage pie. Because these potatoes, I think I have two there, don't I? Oh, that's just one. These potatoes were layered over the top of this pie like they were shingles. Cottage pie was eaten primarily, or a lot of poorer English folk lived in small buildings, of course, called cottages. And it's not the cottage that we definitely think of today. And this is definitely derived from more of a poor man's meal. It was what they used to make do. They didn't waste anything. So these potatoes were layered on here, and they were said to resemble shingles on a cottage. So the name was cottage pie. I'm going to take a couple of these, and I can't tell you that this is what they did, but I can't tell you this is what they didn't do either. But I'm not happy with the amount of potatoes that's actually on here.
I certainly don't want to waste any potatoes.
And I have the potatoes, and like I said, let's not waste. I'm going to take some of these potatoes and put them around the edges, because I think that'll give us some real nice brown and crispy potatoes. Now, the only other thing that's going to go on here is, of course, I'm going to give it a nice dose of black pepper. Both of them. And I'm going to give the sliced potatoes just a little salt, because they don't have any salt in it. Just a little. Because remember, we're salty because of that mushroom ketchup. Now we're just going to take just a couple of these are very thin slices of butter. And I'm going to put these on the top of it. Now, if you wanted to put cheese on top of your pie, I'm not telling you that you can't, but she's like family, Angie. She's like family to us, and she's the one that said, whatever you do, don't put cheese on it. So we're not putting cheese on it. And honestly, I don't think I would like it with cheese.
No.
Cheese wouldn't belong in a beef pot pie, which is basically what this is. It's a beef pot pie with mashed potatoes instead of pieces of potatoes. So we're doing it the way that she says she remembers her dad would cook. And that's part of the reason why we use that meat grinder, is because her dad had a meat grinder like that when she was little. And the one thing that he cooked more than one thing, but she always remembers him making cottage pie. So this is like a fond memory for her. And I would never ruin that memory by putting cheese on it.
Okay, let's see what we got. Let's try the original first. Oh wow, that's really good. Really, really good. And now the more modern version. Both absolutely excellent. Different, but I can't say I prefer one over the other. They're both really, really good. You guys should experiment and try some of this. It's really awesome, and I promise you, if you try it, you'll like it. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, and until next time, God bless you.